Well, it happened. NRG have been eliminated from VCT Americas Kickoff 2025. The team with some of the highest expectations in not just the Americas, but the entire VCT, has collapsed after only 3 matches in the tournament. Having a really rough start to the bracket and then looking like they maybe have their game back in that second match. And then on the day of recording, they lost to Crew, kicking them out of the tournament and out of contention for VCT Masters Bangkok. So today we're going to be looking at their performance in this kickoff tournament. We will be looking at all 3 matches and discussing where this team went wrong and why we're seeing the same things that we saw last year. So this is the board we have today. As you can see, we have all 3 matches that we played, the player stats, some attack and defense stats, and we will be starting with looking at the matches. So we will be starting with the start of the disappointment and looking at their match against C9. This one, NRG could not win a map on. They end up losing this one 0-2. Granted, the 2 maps were pretty close, but that doesn't really tell the whole story. At the end of the first half on Fracture, the first map played in the series, they were down 10-2. C9 were running circles around this team, outcalling them and outplaying them at any point of the map. But then the second half starts and NRG start to mount a comeback and they end up tying the game. Having a 10-2 half of their own, but unfortunately they could not get the job done in overtime. They would end up losing Fracture 14-12. And I decided to include the team MVP for each one of these matches, and in that C9 game, Som was the main reason why they had to come back on Fracture. In those 2 maps, he ended up going 49, 35, and 22 for plus 14. So Som had a really good game. Mada had one as well, but there were some struggles in the rest of the roster. Then we move on to their game against 100 Thieves, and this was them regaining their confidence. However, they would start this one slow off yet again by losing a very close Lotus game, losing yet again in overtime. Both these teams winning 6 rounds on both the first and second half, but NRG seemed to struggle in those overtime rounds, as evident from the 2 times in this tournament that they ended up going there. However, NRG were able to regain control of this series by winning Pearl 13-9. Pearl did look like a pretty good map for them, Mada having a fantastic map on that one, and then they moved on to Bind, having the same exact scoreline as they did in that Pearl game, winning this one 13-9. A lot of improvement shown in this map here, especially on their attack side, winning 7 rounds on their attack side, being able to close this one out before 100 Thieves could even get to double digits. And for the team MVP in that map, Mada was far and above the best player. 73 kills, 47 deaths, 14 assists for plus 26 in that game. Absolutely fantastic work from the new Duelist Prodigy. And then they move on to Crew. So the match against 100 Thieves was seen as this game between 2 teams that probably shouldn't be going out this early. Whichever team lost that match, it would have been seen as a big disappointment, but it's a pretty tough matchup for either team. NRG ends up being the team that comes out on top in that one, but against Crew, definitely a different context. Crew started this kickoff tournament really poorly, losing in an absolute stomping by Loud, a team that looks a lot better than what we expected them to be. And then they did play against 2G and absolutely stomped them, but 2G just looked like the worst team in the region, so it's hard to evaluate Crew on that one. But going into this one, NRG were heavily favored. They were seen as a much better team, a lot higher expectations for them, but Crew played really well in this match. They end up taking it 2-1 over NRG, winning both Abyss and Bind, and NRG just never seemed to have control over this match aside from the second half of Haven. They did have a lead in the first map, they ended the first half 7-5, so it wasn't too big of a gap, but then NRG ended up having a really poor defense side, only being able to win 1 round, only able to get 1 retake win, and Crew just kind of ran through them. And then we moved on to Haven, where this one looked like Crew was going to close this one out quick. Crew started this map off really hot. On their defense line, they ended up having a lead of 7-1 at one point. This looked like this one could be over really quick. However, NRG were able to weather the storm and ended up coming back. Ended the first half 8-4, so Crew still have the advantage, but NRG were starting to pile up rounds. And then NRG won 8 defense rounds in a row to be able to get back in the driver's seat. Crew would do their best to recover, but this one ended up being a 13-10 win for NRG. So they're back in the driver's seat. They got unlucky on Abyss. Maybe that map isn't going to be good for them in the map pool, but now they're moved on to Bind, a map that they look pretty good on against 100 Thieves, and a map that historically FNS-led teams have been pretty good on. But that was not the case. They lose this one without even getting to 10 rounds. 13-7 for Crew was the final score, and very similar to how Haven went, Crew was in the driver's seat quickly. Despite losing the pistol, the first half would end 8-4 in favor of Crew, but hey, it's only 4 rounds, not a huge lead, they can still come back in this one like they did on Haven. And that just would not end up being the case. Crew eventually had a lead of 11-4. NRG would win 3 more rounds, but it just was not enough, and Crew ended up closing this one out. All that despite Mata having a very good game for himself. 64 kills, 44 deaths, 12 assists for +20. Mata was really keeping his team in it for most of this match, and it just felt like he ran out of steam on Bind. As did every single player on that roster. They all went negative on that final map. So when you don't have Mata bailing you out all the time, you kind of have to find someone else to pull up the weight, and just no one was able to do that. And before going into some player stats, I want to talk about their two sides. These are some interesting attack and defense stats here. In 96 rounds on attack, they won 51 rounds, they lost 45. That is a win percentage of 53%, which is respectable. It's not fantastic, but it's respectable. You can get far in a tournament with that win percentage. However, on defense, not so much. In 87 rounds, they won 37, they lost 50, which is a win percentage of 42%. So when your attack win percentage isn't, above 60 or around 60%, and then your defense is 42, that's not great at all. Those numbers do not help you very much. When you look at elite teams, you see that they have win percentages of around 60 or above 60 and a really deep map pool. And looking at how this kickoff went for them, I don't know if this team's map pool is very deep. Right now, this team just looks like they haven't been able to adapt to the new meta. While they did very well in the meta that we had during the offseason, with Neon just being far and above the best character in the game, now Neon is nerfed, Mata was still able to find success on that character, so it felt like that didn't really affect them too much. But it seemed like with Tejo coming in and being a big part of the meta right now, not seeing a lot of creative play from him. Only one player on this roster ended up playing him, and that was Ethan. And Ethan had varying levels of success on that character, but nothing spectacular. So being able to adapt and not just rely on a bunch of set plays, those are very important things to have in this modern day version of Valorant. But at least in this kickoff tournament, that doesn't seem like something they're very good at. Let's look at the player stats and talk about how these players did overall in these 3 matches. I've already talked about Mata a lot, and that's for good reason. I think right now Mata is far and above the best player on this roster. In these 3 matches, he had 178 kills, 130 deaths, 35 assists, and plus 48 for him, and a KD ratio of 1.36, which, if you don't know, is pretty good. Doing this while being this team's duelist player, he played Neon, Jett, Raze, and Yoru. So Mata has proven that he is absolutely an amazing shooter. Mechanically, he's very good at the game. He can play a lot of different characters on that duelist role, which is very important. We see the top elite duelist players be able to play multiple characters, and we see duelist players that can only play maybe 1, maybe 2 characters in the duelist pool and not find as much success as those ones that are a bit more flexible. So NRG picking up Mata, he's proven that he can be elite on any duelist character, and that is a fantastic thing to have. Mata had 40 more kills than Sam, who was second in kills on the team, and he overall had a pretty good performance in kickoff, not too mad at his game, and he definitely helped them a lot on some maps that they were doing poorly on. In these 3 matches, Sam had 138 kills, 125 deaths, 81 assists for plus 13, and a KD ratio of 1.10, doing this on smokes, playing Brimstone, Viper, Omen, Astra, and Harbor. So Sam, I've always thought that he's been a very effective smokes player. He can play that controller role while being very good at franking out, and that's valuable to have. Always like Sam's game. Maybe he could have done more against Crew, but so could have the rest of the team. So I really like what they have in those 2 players right now. The rest of the roster, not as convinced. Verno, I think he's one of the most disappointing players in this kickoff tournament. Verno in the offseason looked like an absolute killer. He was just destroying everybody, especially in that Soup League tournament. He was having some cocky quotes where he was like, I was scared of pro players, but then I realized that they're not that good. Well, maybe you should have waited to say that, at least after kickoff, because Verno, yeah, you looked like a rookie. In these 3 matches, 116 kills, 120 deaths, 42 assists, -4, and a KD ratio of 0.96. Doing this while playing their main initiator playing Sova and Fade, but a little bit of Sentinel with the Vise. So these numbers overall aren't terrible. I'm not trying to say that he was just awful for this team. He definitely had his moments. He had some good maps. He had some bad ones as well. I think the expectations for this guy were maybe a bit too high because of the offseason. He was supposed to be right up there there with Mata for, leading this team in kills and having a really good kill-death ratio. And that's not the only stats that are important to an initiator player, but it's nice to have them, and he was showing that ability in the offseason. So where did that player go? I don't think he's gone or anything, and this to me looks like a player that is a rookie. He's coming into tier 1. He's gonna take some time to make his bearings and make a name for himself. So I don't think that this is the most concerning thing ever, but I will say it is disappointing from what we expected from him because of how good he was in those offseason events. Moving on, we have Ethan, who had a similar performance to Verno, but he is an older player. He has a lot more experience than Verno, so I think at this point in Ethan's career, we can expect some of the inconsistencies. At this tournament, he had 114 kills, 121 deaths, 81 assists for -7, and a KD ratio of 0.94, doing this while being an initiator smoke flex. He played Breach, Omen, Tejo, as well as Sky. Ethan, I think you know what you're getting from him. These numbers aren't too surprising. I think these numbers would look a lot better if the team had gone deeper and Verno had a better kickoff. But I think because there were some struggles from some of the new guys, I think Ethan's performance does look a little bit worse because of that. Again, he had some good maps, he had some bad ones, but overall he was not able to put his team above the rest and really, pick things up when the new guys were struggling. In that last map against Crew, the most important map of this tournament for this team, he only got 6 kills. He was also playing KO, which I missed on the character sheet, so my bad. Again, I think with Ethan, you know where you're getting. You're hoping he can bring some of that veteran experience to the lineup, but you're not looking for him to be the biggest fragger. But so far, his Teo hasn't convinced me that he's the right person for that role. We'll see if maybe Verno picks that up, even though you seem to want Verno on that info initiator with the Sova and the Fade, but maybe a switch up would benefit both players. We will see how the rest of the year goes for Ethan. I still think he has a lot to give, and we've seen him have a bit of inconsistencies before, so this is nothing new, but definitely hoping for a better performance in Stage 1. And then we have FNS, who seems to be one of the biggest points of discussion when it comes to this roster. Man, the chat in those energy games, they're going at him, man. The chat either loves FNS or just absolutely hates him. And most of that is because FNS, historically and in this kickoff tournament, is not the biggest fragger. In this kickoff tournament, he did have some pretty abysmal individual stats. 86 kills, 126 deaths, 59 assists. He had -40, so 40 more deaths than he had kills. That's really bad. And a KD ratio of 0.68, which was right around where Boostio was. Doing this while mainly being their Sentinel player, but picking up some other roles where it was needed. He played Killjoy, Breach, Cypher, Viper, as well as Vise. So FNS, just like Boostio, I question whether or not they are the right choices as IGL. FNS is a very experienced caller. He's one of the oldest players in Valorant right now. He has a pedigree. He's won tournaments before. He's been a part of some really good rosters, and he could really help this young team figure out their way in esports. My issue with them is the same issue as I have with Boostio. While we don't need the IGL to be the one who's getting all the kills, who's making the crazy plays, when the IGLs do that, it's very, very valuable. We saw Adverso, Crew's IGL, in the match against NRG have a very good individual game. Loud, a team that people expected to not be as good as they were in years past, have Vinny, who is having an amazing tournament so far. John QT on Sentinels last year and this year so far, great individual performer while being really good at calling. So while there still is value in FNS's calling, and I definitely think he can have a bounce back in Stage 1, I do not expect these numbers to get much better. And having a player that is going -40 and has a KD ratio of 0.68, I can understand why fans might want to change at the IGL position when it comes to this roster. I don't think that's what they need. I don't think that's what they should do. But if there's IGLs out there, such as, maybe Rossi would be available. He doesn't have a team right now, and he's proven to be one of those IGLs that can frag out on his own. NRG might be able to look at a player like that or other players similar to them and be like, maybe. I'm not advocating for FNS to be kicked out of this roster, nor was I when I was talking about 100 Thieves and Boostio. I just think that if FNS's calling is not getting this team to where they need to be successful, and these individual stats are as bad as they are, then there might have to be a change there. If they start winning and FNS still has bad numbers, then that's okay because the team's winning and nothing else matters. But if they continue to struggle, then you just can't have a player who's going -40 in every tournament. That's just something that you just can't have. So we'll see where the rest of the year goes for this NRG roster. This is why I didn't put them at number 1 on my power ranking heading into kickoff. I will be doing an updated power ranking at the end of kickoff, and don't expect NRG to be that high. I don't even think that their bracket was particularly difficult. Crew ended up being a lot better in this match than some people expected, but still, they were still the heavy favorites and they just couldn't get it done. So we'll see if in stage 1, maybe in a more underdog role, if this team can succeed. But for now, I'm keeping my expectations low, and maybe that's a good idea for the fans. So let me know in the comment section down below, what do you think of this version of the NRG roster? What do you think of their kickoff performance? Do you think this is a team that just needs more time in the oven and just needs to cook a little? They have some rookies that need to find their bearings, and it's not a big deal if they don't make the first Masters of the year. They can always make the other 2. Or is this evident of how the rest of the year is going to go for this team? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Please click like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.